here to discuss awareness around the everyday struggles of those living in poverty and what October 17th brings in terms of international recognition and local efforts in awareness. Haniff, welcome to Good Morning, SKN.
Welcome, good morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Pleasure.
First off, can you tell us a little bit about the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty and how it came to be?
Absolutely. So International Day of the Eradication of Poverty is an annual observance that is celebrated on October 17th, and it is primarily devoted to presenting and promoting, as appropriate in the national context, concrete activities with regards to the eradication of poverty and destitution. So the UN also recognized that the poor are actually the experts of their own situations and know what exactly they need. So the day is meant to be an opportunity to work with people living in poverty to identify long-term solutions to their immediate problems.
So how has that been going here in St. Kitts?
Right. So here in St. Kitts and Nevis, the Ministry of Social Development, Gender Affairs, Aging and Disabilities is a quite bit to remember now that the name has changed. We are the government arm that is responsible primarily for alleviating poverty, and we do so through a number of social assistance programs, and we also have a community development program. So the community development program, as a community development officer, we primarily go out into the communities and we empower community residents to identify what their development needs are. Okay. And we also assist them in terms of putting together exactly what action plan is needed to address those needs. And in addition to that, we have quite a number of social assistance programs, and I'm sure many persons are aware of. There is the food voucher assistance, the medical assistance, the home care assistance. We also have the school uniform assistance that has concluded recently, and the burial and funeral assistance.
Okay. All right, so if I were to ask you how effective you think the ministry is in identifying persons, are there challenges to that, or do you think you're doing a good enough job right now?
I think we are definitely doing what we can. We do have our officers, our field officers, who go out and identify these persons. We do quite a number of assessments. And of course, these persons also come to us and identify themselves as persons who need assistance.
So this year's theme is Dignity for All in Practice. Can you tell us what this means this year on the international level and also within our little federation of St. Kitts and Nevis?
So Dignity for All in Practice, what this means for the ministry is that all systems created and utilized must respect the dignity of all persons. And this is a virtue that exists within the social work profession. Dignity, that is something that is central to the profession, where we must uphold the dignity of all persons. And this is actually ingrained in the mission of the ministry, where the Ministry of the Social Development and Gender Affairs and Aging and Disabilities is dedicated to serving vulnerable populations through advocacy, education, empowerment, and enhancement of individuals, families, and communities through evidence-based and customer-oriented programs that must promote equity, growth, and development regardless of race and culture. And the actual Universal Declaration of Human Rights speaks to human dignity in its preamble, where it says, whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. So dignity is basically central to our profession and what we do.
All right, so we're talking about poverty. We think that we have a working definition of poverty, but there is actually an official definition that comes from the United Nations. Can you tell us what that is?
All right, so I did not actually put it here. I don't know if you have it yourself, but I actually did not put it here.
All right, but operationally then, when you think of poverty, what do you think?
There isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all definition when it comes to poverty. It's really a multidimensional concept. Basically, poverty is the inability to access, essential needs, the necessities because of lack of income. But we do understand that it's not just necessarily based on income. There are lots of other contributing factors that will lead to poverty. You have education, your health care facilities and services, lack of proper basic public infrastructure, and so on and so on.
So in your work with people here, is there one thing more than the other that you think would lead to poverty or lead to that classification?
Initially, when we do our assessments or when persons come to apply for these assistances, it almost comes off as if it's just one issue. But when you do your case management, which is a very integral component to eradicating poverty and assisting persons, you will find out that there's much underlying issues. It's really a complex issue. And it is our responsibility through case management to identify the root cause of the problem and to assist these persons, connect them to outside services that would help them alleviate the root cause of the problem, and ultimately our goal of eradicating poverty.
Can you tell us in St. Kitts which specific demographic does poverty affect?
With the last statistics that we have dated back as far as 2008 when the last country poverty assessment was conducted, so my statistics might be a little bit outdated, but it is common knowledge to identify the vulnerable groups in our society that would be most affected by poverty, which would include single mothers, children, the disabled, the aging population. And a lot of persons don't really focus and zoom in on the aging and disabilities population. And realistically, when you look at the aging population, you must understand that these are persons who are retired. They have a limited income, but everything for them is still going on. The expenses are still going on. As a matter of fact, the expenses might even be increased because now they have the continuation of the electricity bills and all these bills, but there's also the medical bills because of health, issues that may arise. So we tend to look at the aging population a bit and know that we are looking into building out an actual unit that is dedicated to aging and disabilities issues. So we tend to focus on that a little bit more.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Happy to hear that.
All right. So is there such a thing in your experience as intergenerational poverty? And if so, what are the steps that we can take to mitigate against that?
Yes, intergenerational poverty does exist. It's really a cycle of poverty where, and just to give you a scenario, I might not have access to education. I will not go to school. I might not get a good job, get the necessary income to feed my family, and then that continues with my children. They might be cut off from accessing education. It continues. And what we normally look at in terms of breaking the cycle of poverty is outside forces, external forces. And that is where, for example, us as a ministry will come in through these assistance programs, not just giving you the financial assistance, but also connecting you to services, programs outside of that would assist you in breaking that cycle of poverty. So intergenerational poverty really exists. But like I said, once we connect persons to these different opportunities, we hope to break that cycle.
Now, Haniff, you mentioned a few of the ways your department is working to alleviate poverty in St. Kitts and Nevis. Are there any other, how should I put it, any other things that are in place to help, other than the giving out of the vouchers, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, presently, the only initiative I can really speak on, as you might be aware, the Poverty Alleviation Program, officially, as the PAP program, officially has been handed over to the Ministry of Social Development as of October 3rd. And so we have operational and managerial oversight for that program. Currently, we are revamping, for lack of a better word, revamping the program just so that it aligns with our other social assistance programs. And of course, adding that touch of empowerment and advocacy that is very much needed when we are discussing upholding the dignity of our clients.
Nice, good stuff.
Are you at liberty to tell us what that restructuring looks like?
I can't let the cat out of the bag as yet.
Stir it up.
But persons can definitely expect, in terms of eradicating poverty, really getting down to the root issue of it. Of course, like I said, there's a case management component of it. So we'll be working with individuals to make sure that they get back on track, whatever services that they need to be connected to, that they are connected to those services, whatever training and skills acquisition that they need. All of that is in place for them.
So how do you address the stigma one might feel in seeking assistance or being poor and in need?
That is a very interesting question. I think because of the values that are enshrined in the ministry, in terms of upholding dignity and having that customer-focused relationship with our clients, I think because of that, we set the tone with you, when you come to us, we acknowledge you as somebody who is in need, but we also acknowledge you as a human being.
Yes.
We take into consideration the emotions that might come when you're in such dire situations. So we treat you nothing less than a human being.
Exactly.
And of course, because of that relationship building that is set in the initial stages of the assistance, then we can go along and, probably persons might not fear the whole process and feel, less of a person when they come to us. But there is definitely a stigma. Persons feel, some persons feel as though they're begging, quote unquote. I actually had an experience one time where this was an individual who was making quite a sizable income, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously they would have had to, they would have left their job and they would have ended up seeking assistance. And I remember in my office, that person actually broke down. And I had to, kind of encourage them and let them know that, this is a situational.
Yes, exactly.
It's situational. And of course, just instilling a lot of those values that we as social work professionals, we are trained to instill.
I have a follow-up question, Haniff. Do persons that are in poverty, how bad do they want to come out of poverty?
That is a very interesting question, because I have a little bit of a controversial answer to that. We do have persons who very much so want to get out of their situation. They will do anything, so they will latch on to any training programs, any assistance programs that are available. But there are some persons who become very comfortable in their situation after a while, and it takes quite a little bit of a push to get them out of that, out of that mindset, and let them bring them back to that position where, hey, you need to get back on track.
Yes. Okay.
All right, well, I imagine that's not going to be easy work, because that was something that I wanted to ask about as well.
It is
how
not
much of a
easy.
clutch, perhaps, do these systems seem to be. All right, when it comes to your collaboration with other ministries, do you have anything interesting to tell us, or anything that you think the public ought to know about the way that you're working with other ministries to alleviate poverty?
Well, there is much needed interconnectedness with other ministries. We definitely can't do it alone. Much of the programs that we would put in place, we would need to liaise with other ministries, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Youth, and other ministries. So it is very important for us that when we are putting in place these social assistance programs, and also social security, when we're putting in place these social assistance programs, we are not operating in silos. We have the advice, we act on the advice of other players, key players in it.
All right, so central to a lot of your work, I would imagine, would be updated statistics as well. Okay.
We would love that.
Just thought I'd learn
Yes, but acquiring data is usually an issue. Sometimes we get quite a bit good of information, but sometimes some very pertinent information is missing. Sometimes it's not necessarily collected in detail when we do the national census.
I was going to ask on that.
Sometimes that information is not collected, but when we are doing our own assessment, sometimes we go out and collect the information ourselves if needed, if that is necessary.
Okay.
All right, so listening to you, I'm getting the sense that you can use the data that's provided, of course, from the census, but if you need, let's say, more information.
Yes.
Do additional research.
Yes, we have to do additional research, because sometimes the data is not always forthcoming.
And how cooperative are folks when you have to do the additional research, bearing in mind that they might say, oh, but the census people is just here.
Yeah.
How
We
cooperative are they?
do get a little pushback,
Okay.
If you want to put it in nice terms, we do get a little pushback. But at the end of the day, when you remind persons that this is for their benefit, this will benefit them in the long run, and if not them specifically, maybe their families, they tend to get a bit more cooperative.
All right, so here's a bit of a personal question for you as Community Development Officer. Obviously, we're talking about poverty. This is your opportunity, I would say, to say to the general public what your thoughts are on their experiences and how, your department can help. So,
all right, so my advice or my word to the general public is that whatever situation you find yourselves in right now in terms of poverty, it is not that experience that will define you. The Ministry of Social Development is working assiduously to ensure that you can get back on your feet, that we can, of course, eradicate poverty, and central to that, we uphold the dignity of all persons who come to us. So don't feel like you have to operate in a silo, that you're in a box. Feel free to come to us if you need any sort of assistance, and we'll be happy to provide what assistance is available from our end or connect you to the available services in our communities.